1940. Europe was ablaze. Following the swift fall of France and the devastating losses at Dunkirk, Britain stood virtually alone. The conventional military power needed to challenge Nazi Germany was simply not there. It was in this desperate hour that Prime Minister Winston Churchill, looking beyond traditional warfare, advocated for a new kind of fight. Inspired by the exploits of T.E. Lawrence in World War I, Churchill envisioned organized armed resistance, a way to set Europe ablaze from within. This vision led to the creation of the Special Operations Executive, or SOE, in July 1940. Across the Atlantic, President Franklin Roosevelt recognized the growing need for American unconventional capabilities, establishing the Office of Coordinator of Information, which would later become the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, in 1942. As German occupation tightened its grip on France, imposing forced labor drafts like the Service du Travail Obligatoire in 1943, thousands of Frenchmen fled to the countryside, forming disparate resistance groups known as the Maquis, named after the scrub brush found in Corsica. The challenge was clear: how to channel this burgeoning resistance into a strategic weapon for the Allies. The answer emerged from the minds of SOE leaders like Brigadier Colin Gubbins. They conceived of a uniformed Special Forces unit, small, highly trained and multinational, designed to parachute deep behind enemy lines. These units would organize, arm, and train the Maquis, integrating them into the broader Allied military strategy. They were given a simple, cryptic code name, Jedburgh, a name chosen randomly from an approved list for security reasons. It had no connection to any specific operation or any historical guerrilla warfare in Scotland. Despite lingering misconceptions, the Jedburgh concept represented a novel approach to modern warfare. For decades, the story of France's liberation often centered on the Grand Allied armies. Yet, newly examined records, declassified decades after the war, reveal a different, equally vital truth: the crucial role of these specialized units and the resistance movements they supported. The success of the Jedburghs hinged on the exceptional qualities of the men selected. These were not ordinary soldiers. They needed an adventurous spirit, unwavering self-reliance, and profound adaptability. They were troublemakers, in fact, psychologically incapable of remaining quiet. The recruitment process was rigorous, often unconventional. British Wing Commander Forrest U. Thomas, for example, rejected 6 of 8 officers, suspecting they were merely seeking a free railway voucher to London. The Americans, under Major Franklin Canfield of the OSS, sought similar caliber French officers, many veterans of Free French Infantry or eager for actions after Vichy's fall. Volunteered from places like Algiers. 1. Lieutenant Michael de Bourbon was a mere 17-year-old descendant of French monarchs. Training for American Jedburghs took place at discrete locations. The Congressional Country Club, outside Washington, D.C., was leased by the OSS and transformed into Area F. Fairways became obstacle courses, the ballroom an oversized classroom. Psychologists and psychiatrists meticulously screened candidates, exposing the troublesome, the inept, the lazy, the misfit. The goal, as described by Bernard Knox, was to select men psychologically incapable of remaining quiet. A second base, Area B, was established at Cato Quinte Mountain Park, just miles from President Roosevelt's secret retreat, Shangri-La. Later, Camp David. Here, a 58-year-old British instructor named William Wirt Fairbairn, a veteran of the Shanghai police, taught silent killing techniques. His Fairbairn method focused on targeting nerve centers and pressure points using a foot-long stiletto known as the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife. Demolitories, walls blowing up, trees, walls silence, and old cars using malleable plastic explosives and flexible primacord detonating cord. Operatives learned to set time pencils for delayed explosions. Parachute training was equally demanding. The British method involved dropping through a hole in the fuselage of a 4-engine bomber. Another disconcerting method involved jumping from a basket suspended beneath a balloon, where parachutes took an unusually long time to open. A former Hollywood stuntman and American Jed, Captain René Dussac, stunned instructors with a swan dive from the balloon basket. By March 1944, Jedburghs began forming their own 3-man teams. These were multinational units typically comprised of a British, an American and a French operative, each selected for their specific skills: a commander, a second-in-command and a radio operator. This self-selection, known as the engagement period, was crucial for building the profound trust required for deep penetration missions. By December 1943, the first group of American Jedburghs departed New York City, crossing the Atlantic aboard the converted troopship, the Queen Elizabeth. The luxury liner, stripped of its peacetime opulence, now carried 15,000 troops, its 28-knot speed offering some defense against German U-boats. Other Jeds, including radio operators like Bob Kao, crossed on the Queen Mary, enduring a violent storm that left many seasick. These voyages brought them to Gourock, Scotland, the final staging point for their clandestine war. By the spring of 1944, the massive preparations for Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of France, were reaching their climax. Over 1.5 million American troops, housed in more than 1,000 locations across Britain, were poised for the largest amphibious assault in history. General Dwight D. in Two Things Assault in History. Eisenhower, the supreme commander, understood the monumental challenge. His plan hinged not just on overwhelming force, but on disrupting German reinforcements and communications, preventing them from reaching the Normandy beaches. Intelligence estimated Germany could deploy 31 divisions, including 9 panzer divisions, to Normandy within 25 days of D-Day. A threat that had to be neutralized. The Jedburghs, alongside the French resistance, were a critical piece of this strategic puzzle. Their mission was clear: to coordinate sabotage and guerrilla warfare behind enemy lines, complementing the advancing Allied ground forces. This involved cutting rail lines and roads, disrupting communications, and striking at supply depots. Crucial to this strategy was the transportation plan, a pre-D-Day campaign to cripple French rail infrastructure. Allied air power would assist by bombing key bridges and rail yards, but the resistance would complete the vital, precise cuts. A sophisticated deception operation, Fortitude, further aimed to convince Germany the invasion would occur at Pas-de-Calais, tying down the German 15th Army, a crucial factor in the initial success of D-Day. On June 4, 1944, Jedburgh teams across England were put on high alert, only for Eisenhower to postpone D-Day by 24 hours due to a severe storm. The decision was a stark reminder of the immense risks involved and the critical role of meteorology in the fate of nations. Finally, on June 5, Eisenhower gave the final order to launch the invasion. The first Jedburgh teams prepared to jump. These teams often flew in specially modified B-24 Liberators, nicknamed carpetbaggers, or in British Sterling bombers, long blunt-nosed aircraft painted black for night operations. Each Sterling could carry 15 jumpers, along with man-sized tubular canisters, Type C containers, filled with weapons, explosive radios, WAL, and other vital equipment. At 23:30 hours on the night of June 5, Jedburgh Team Frederick, comprising Major Wise, British commander, Lieutenant Aguirre, French, and Sergeant Bob Kehoe, American radio operator, departed from an airfield in Fairford, Gloucestershire. Their destination: farmland south of Gingham, Brittany. They jumped from less than 500 feet, exiting through a trapdoor in the bomber's floor known as the Joe Hole. Upon landing, they were met by eager Maquisards, who had marked the drop zone with a triangle of bonfires, illuminated only when the approaching aircraft was heard. The reception was fervent, with locals offering mugs of bitter apple cider and bread and cheese, but this enthusiasm came with a significant risk. In the excitement of the moment, the bonfires, which should have been quickly extinguished, were left burning. A large crowd, men and women, gathered to watch, oblivious to the strict security protocols of clandestine operations. Noise and light discipline were virtually non-existent. This security lapse would have immediate and severe consequences. Within days, Jedburgh teams like Frederick and George, alongside French SAS units, found themselves in perilous circumstances. Just after midnight on June 6, as Allied aircraft filled the skies over Normandy, Jedburgh Team George, led by Captain Paul Cyr and Captain Philippe Erard, jumped into Brittany, attached to the Dingson SAS party near Redentor 6, and Captain Philippe Erard jumped into Brittany attached to the Dingson SAS party near Redentor Teepses. Captain Philippe Erard jumped into Never. Jedburgh Teams George, led by Captain Philippe Erard, jumped into Philippe Erard. Their reception was equally enthusiastic, but again with concerning security breaches. Reports surfaced of SAS men dining in local restaurants and the fervent welcome parties attracting undue attention. This was no isolated incident. On the night of June 11, a small group of Maquis, celebrating their new Allied guests, were attacked by German officers at a nearby farm. By dawn, 40 German paratroopers had burned the farm, killing everyone inside. The Germans, aided by informants and radio direction-finding technology, were intensifying their counter-guerrilla campaign. They often used radio-locating cars equipped with rotating antennae, a constant threat to clandestine radio operators like Colho and Lieutenant Lejeune of Team George. The core of Jedburgh operations lay in communication. Bob Cahoe, a 19-year-old, nearsighted lab assistant turned radioman, was responsible for the Jed set, a specialized radio developed by the SOE. This 40-pound pack contained a receiver powered by dry-cell batteries and a transmitter requiring a hand-cranked generator packed into 5 canvas satchels. Its postage-stamp-sized quartz crystals were fragile, yet critical for setting frequencies. Cahoe's first message to London on June 11th captured the dual nature of their mission. Arrived safely with all containers and equipta, have contacted local groups. Great possibilities. Cite D. Tordord area. Send JD team and arms for them. Advise soonest possible dropping ground. Meanwhile, Captain Leblond and SAS officer reported on the brutal realities of partisan warfare. He recounted ordering the execution of suspected spies, a man and a woman, after finding a plan of the camp and a list of nearby villages on them. The Maquis meted out their own harsh justice, beating and stabbing to death a man accused of spying and shooting one of the women. These were the grim realities of the Shadow War. For Team Frederick, the early days in Brittany were a constant struggle for operational security. Cahoe's carbine was destroyed in its container during the jump, and their critical Jed set had to be hidden. Days after their landing, Cahoe and Sergeant Robert, his taciturn French counterpart, set out to recover the radio. Under a sliver of moon, they located the buried equipment, its dry cell battery for receiving still functional. But transmitting required the hand-cranked generator and the assistance of local Maquisards, a risky venture that made them vulnerable to German detection. In mid-June, their mission pivoted. Rather than proceeding to a distant SAS base, Major Wise decided Team Frederick would engage with the local resistance leader, Marcel, the FFI chief for Côtes du Nord. Simone Le Gothic, a local schoolteacher and resistance member, and her resourceful husband, Marcel Quenic, became vital guides. Word of the Allied presence spread, and with it, German suspicion intensified. Notices were posted throughout France, warning of severe penalty shooting, concentration camps for aiding Allied parachutists. By June 18th, an estimated 4,000 Germans swept the Duolt forest, searching for the newly arrived Jedburgh and SAS forces. Miraculously, Team Frederick evaded capture, relocating their command post to a deserted cottage near Canahuel by July 9th. Here, they organized the flow of intelligence and supplies. The Jedburgh's efforts were proving crucial. By June 15th, General Eisenhower noted the Maquis were far more effective than many doubting Thomases thought before D-Day. In northern Brittany, Major Wise's Team Frederick focused on organizing and arming local groups, securing critical infrastructure like Route Nationale 12 and its parallel double-track railway which extended all the way to Paris. They protected vital railway bridges at Saint-Brieuc, Guingamp, and the monumental Morlaix Viaduct, a 1,000-foot-long granite structure crucial for German troop movements. Meanwhile, Team George faced a more direct confrontation. On the morning of June 18th, the Dingson SAS base in Brittany, comprising between 600 and 1,000 SAS and Maquis defenders, came under sustained attack from at least 100 Germans, escalating to an estimated 4,000 to 5,000 enemy troops. Despite fierce resistance, including effective use of the PI-80 anti-tank weapon and a Bren light machine gun that inflicted significant casualties, the base was ultimately overrun. Nearly 600 Germans were killed, but the SAS and Maquis suffered heavy losses, 50 SAS and as many as 200 Maquisards. Colonel Bourgoin, the formidable one-armed commander of the French AS, led a desperate breakout. Captain Cyr of Jedburgh Team George, now leading a company, fought his way out, beginning a perilous 9-day journey. His team reached the Loire Inférieure, a less organized Maquis area, a less organized Maquis region, by June 27th. Here, they encountered groups armed with little more than .22 caliber rifles and old shotguns. The urgency to arm and organize these disparate groups became paramount. The German attacks, while costly for the resistance, also forced their units to consolidate into larger, slower-moving convoys, making them more vulnerable to Allied air attacks. The SAS, despite the Dingson setback, virtually shut down all rail traffic between Brittany and Normandy, forcing the Germans to rely on road transport. This allowed the resistance, under Jedburgh guidance, to ambush and harass. But logistical failures often hampered their impact. London's initial silence and doubt regarding Team George's safety, due to radio gaps, led to the suspension of crucial supply drops. By late July, Jedburgh Team George achieved a critical intelligence coup. French engineers working for the resistance, having worked on the German defences for Saint-Nazaire, provided Team George with detailed plans. This was vital, actionable intelligence. Captain Erard of Team George was tasked with delivering them. He was captured, but miraculously escaped, eventually delivering the plans to Lieutenant Colonel Bob Powell, a Special Forces representative on Patton's staff. This direct contact bypassed London's communication bottlenecks, ensuring the intelligence reached operational command. General Patton's Third Army was now making its audacious dash across central France. His extensive right flank, stretching more than 300 miles from Saint-Nazaire to Troyes, was left largely exposed. This seemingly reckless gamble was, in fact, a calculated risk, made possible by top-secret ultra-intelligence derived from decrypted German Enigma messages. Ultra confirmed that German forces south of the Loire were under orders to withdraw, not attack. The FFI, armed and guided by the Jedburghs, would guard Patton's flank. Major Colby and Lieutenant Farvel of Jedburgh Team Bruce met with Patton's staff, securing a mission for the FFI of the Yonne Department. Colonel Chevrier was officially named Chief of the FFI for the entire Yonne, responsible for organizing the resistance for flank protection. His network grew to some 2,000 fighters. These Maquisards established positions along a line through the Yonne, destroying bridges, cutting roads, and harassing retreating German convoys. Their actions were not just disruptive, they were strategically vital. In the Aisne Department, Jedburgh Team Augustus, including Captain Jean Delviche, French, Major John Bonsall, American, and Sergeant Roger Coate, radio operator, organized 1,100 armed and trained men, with thousands more awaiting weapons. They intercepted German radio traffic, identifying their locations and intentions. What forces behind. The FFI occupied vacated towns ahead of the Allies, preventing German demolitions and securing valuable resources, such as the thousands of gallons of gasoline found at Monateau. The Jedburghs often had to overcome internal challenges within the resistance. Jedburgh Team Bruce, for instance, landed in compromised territory. Their intended contact, Roger Bardet, Frager's adjutant in the Donkeyman circuit, was, unbeknownst to London, a traitor. Bardet had been feeding information to Abwehr Sergeant Hugo Bleicher since 1943, leading to numerous arrests, including that of Henry Frager himself. Colby and Favel, suspicious of Bardet, quickly shifted their support to Colonel Chevrier. They facilitated arms drops for Chevrier's 2,000 men, turning the Yonne into a powerful resistance base. The impact of these operations was profound. The Maquis successfully delayed German divisions moving towards Normandy by an average of 2 days. By late August, Team Frederick alone had armed 4,200 men in Côtes du Nord and estimated their Maquis groups had put 2,500 Germans out of action in 1 month. The FFI derailed at least 40 trains and captured 200 vehicles. This disruption was critical to the success of Operation Cobra, the Allied breakout from Normandy on July 25, and Patton's subsequent dash across France. The strategic shift away from seizing the heavily fortified Breton ports, such as Brest and Saint-Nazaire, was partly influenced by their extreme cost in Allied lives and the need for a faster eastward push towards the Seine and Paris. The Allied encirclement of German forces in the Falaise-Argenton Gap, trapping an estimated 100,000 Germans, was enabled by the swift advances of conventional forces, but also by the relentless pressure exerted by the resistance and Jedburghs on German lines of retreat. Even the liberation of Paris, initially viewed as a logistical hindrance by Allied high command, was propelled by the uprising of the FFI on August 19. Jedburgh teams facilitated urgent arms drops for the 20,000, albeit poorly armed, resistance fighters in the capital. General Eisenhower, acknowledging their effectiveness, publicly commended the FFFF. He recognized their broader impact in creating an atmosphere of danger and hatred for the Germans, contributing to the psychological breakdown of their forces. The Jedburgh program, with fewer than 300 men, had a disproportionately immense impact. They were the first institutionalized, uniformed military force designed to rally and direct irregular partisans deep in enemy territory. Many Jedburghs earned numerous decorations for their bravery and went on to remarkable post-war careers as statesmen, diplomats, and military professionals. They were, in many ways, the first diplomat soldiers. Due to the extreme secrecy surrounding their activities, their immense contributions remained largely unknown and uncredited for decades. It was not until declassification efforts began in the 1980s that their story began to emerge, finally revealing the full scope of their courage, their ingenuity, and their critical yet often unseen role in the Allied victory. But the story of Jedburgh Team Augustus serves as a stark reminder of the extreme dangers inherent in such clandestine operations, especially amidst the whirlwind of a swift Allied advance. The chaotic environment following the Normandy breakthroughs both opened opportunities and posed mortal threats to these operatives. As lead Allied divisions, including the 3rd Armoured Division, surged across the Seine by August 26, pushing relentlessly eastward, German defensive capabilities were overwhelmed. This rapid push, dubbed the Champagne Campaign, created a vacuum of control, yet also left pockets teeming with desperate retreating German formations. Deep behind these fluid lines, Jedburgh Team Augustus, comprising Major Bonsall, Captain Delvice, and Roger Cote, faced mounting frustrations. On August 23, the three Jades met with local FFI chiefs, discussing planned guerrilla operations. However, by August 25, a message from Augustus reached SFHQ, expressing acute frustration over their inability to effectively organize the Maquis. The overwhelming German presence in areas like Soissons, combined with a critical lack of arms for the resistance, rendered their initial mission objectives almost impossible. Operating in civilian clothes, a necessary precaution that forfeited their combatant status, they navigated an increasingly hazardous landscape. This perception of an incomplete mission, coupled with a burning desire to continue behind enemy lines, began to fuel a fateful determination. Meanwhile, the 3rd Armoured Division, under Brigadier General Maurice Rose, was spearheading First Army's attack, moving straight through Soissons and Laon. On August 29th, the division seized vital Aisne river crossings, even as Field Marshal Walther Model, commander of Army Group B, evacuated the expansive steel-reinforced concrete Marjapol fortification. This complex, built as Hitler's planned invasion headquarters and temporarily occupied by Model, was now abandoned, its significance a testament to the shifting tides of war. The presence of remnants of German armies like the Panzer Lehr Division shuffling through the Soissons area made the territory exceptionally perilous at Vesage. Yet, on August 28, Team Augustus planned a daring attempt to contact U.S. Corps d'Air ground troops. The next day, August 29th, they successfully rendezvoused with elements of the 3rd Armoured Division, providing a critical information transfer. They passed along intelligence gathered through FFI contacts like Seigneur and Costeau, though perhaps not of great importance. By this late stage of the rapid advance, it contributed to the Allied understanding of German defences. This successful contact, however, served as a turning point, mistakenly providing a perceived pathway to mission to Passient. The Jeds' frustration, their dedication, and the perceived incompleteness of their core mission spurred them on. They gambled that they could still make a significant difference, deciding to attempt to recross into German territory. Their target was the hastily established German defence line formed by the Serre River, behind which lay the Panzer Lehr Division. Under cover of a gathering storm on August 30th, they made their move. Utilizing a horse-drawn peasant cart, they sought to blend into the desperate flow of civilians and retreating forces. It was a gamble taken near the small village of Barenton-sur-Serre that proved fatal. At a crossroads, 3 German tanks lay waiting, an unexpected, brutal stroke of sheer bad luck. The team was captured. Then the chilling sound of 7 shots echoed from the village. Major Bonsall, Captain Delvice, and Roger Cote were killed. Their bodies were later found. Military identification cards confirmed the identities of Bonsall and Delvice. Roger Cote wore a silver chain with a tiny cross and a medal inscribed, "I am a Catholic, please call a priest." The tragic loss of Jedburgh Team Augustus underscores the extreme dangers faced by behind-the-lines operative during rapid advances. Their story serves as a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of war and the cruel role of chance in operative success and failure. It implicitly debunks the idea that intelligence operations are solely about gathering information, emphasizing the critical need for arms and local support for Maquis units to be truly effective. It counters the notion that operative missions are always cleanly defined and completed. Sometimes the perception of incompletance constitutes of incompletance, and completedly defined incompleted, and completed to a farther fatal risks of torg. It counter and completed torg. It counter and completed, and counter and completed torg, and completed, and counter and completed. Even as the 3rd Armoured Division crossed the border into Belgium by September 2nd, SFHQ transmitted a final mission-ended message to Team Augustus on September 16th, a poignant end to a mission already tragically concluded. The speed of the Allied liberation, while triumphant, also created pockets of intense localized resistance and danger. In the Rhône Valley, another testament to the complex interplay of conventional and unconventional warfare was unfolding. The relentless harassment by the Maquis took a terrible toll on the retreating German enemy, directly aiding the Allied advance.